Okay, we are
Great.
recording.
And I was, I was hoping to have a beverage with me in hand during this call, but I've been moving around so much that I don't have it.
Well, I have an iced tea, so.
Okay. Doesn't have any KOVAL products in it?
No, not in it. No. Still have a lot of work to do.
Oh man, no problem. Cool. Well, like I said, we'll wait a few minutes, kind of let that happen, and then yeah, we're just recording, and it'll be on YouTube, and excited to definitely create a blog article about it and everything as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, we can also probably begin. As we mentioned, we're recording, so we'll probably, trim whatever we have to for this section at least, and we'll put it up. And then it's also we do have it notated and everything. So in any case, yeah, really appreciate you hopping on. Sonat, oh my gosh, Sonat, you have to tell me your Sonat Birnecker Hart. Dr.
Yes.
Sonat Birnecker Hart. We really appreciate you coming on to the VisualFizz Growth Series. Generally speaking, we do host these in person, but unfortunately, we're still kind of, thankfully, towards the end of this this long-awaited period.
Right.
But we're really excited to have you on here. If you're from Chicago or not, you've probably heard of KOVAL. I have to start with a really quick story about KOVAL first before I even begin this whole thing. And I think I even told you the story once earlier on when we first met. I was in Scotland with my fiance, and obviously they're known for their scotch. And I go to this this bartender in this huge scotch related scotch focused bar, and I'm like, get me something that's really unique and interesting and something that I would really like because we're in Scotland. And he's like, oh, we have a great new product. We're doing it in partnership with this cool company out of the United States. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. He's like, yeah, it's in Chicago. It's called KOVAL. We're using the KOVAL barrels. And I was like, I live 2 miles from KOVAL. Can you provide me something? I was like, this is so close to home. I'm in Scotland, and yet they know who you are, and they're using your guys' barrels. And I was like, this is such a cool thing because without even trying, I've been kind of intercepted with KOVAL, and it's so great because you have this international presence, which I'm a huge fan of. So that's my kind of intro to how big KOVAL has gotten over the years. But I'd love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. I mean, it's fun when you travel around and you see what you make, and that's something that I've experienced as well. And it never ceases to amaze me when I go somewhere and I see it on a back bar, whether it's in Italy or Japan. But basically, KOVAL started with my husband and I deciding that we wanted a lifestyle change. I was pregnant with my first child, and we were living in the DC area. I was a professor, and my husband was the deputy press secretary of the Austrian embassy. But we decided that we wanted for our family to be in a city that we really loved. We liked the idea of working together. We liked the idea of having our children close at hand while working. And really that requires your own business, being an entrepreneur, because then you get to make the rules. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to do it in Chicago, which I love and am obsessed with as a city. I think it's a fabulous place to live and have a family. And I always wanted to come back to Chicago, even though I lived in many places around the world. And since I didn't have any ruby slippers to get me back, whiskey was the solution. So we decided that.
Wait, I'll stop you there. We have so much more storytelling. We're going to get there.
Okay.
I told you we just need a little intro, and you gave us so much information, but we're going to get there. Sonat,
sure,
so don't
sure.
worry. I know it's exciting. I do it too. And Marissa, my co-founder, actually stops me because I get right into it. And she's like, wait, we've got to introduce ourselves. And I'm so bad about this. So I see people coming in, guys. Thanks for coming and joining us here. But we're just going to start even earlier on. Sonat, you gave us Sonat, sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so used to that.
No, right.
Sonat, you gave us so much good information, but let's start earlier on. I want to know a little bit more about, your early life. As a child, I don't think your goal was to start a liquor company. So maybe you'd speak to us a little about, a little bit about your childhood and,
Mhm.
kind of your upbringing.
Ooh, my upbringing. I mean, I was very blessed to have had a awesome childhood. My parents were and my siblings were my best friends, and we spent a lot of time together, and that was just, I mean, after when I went to college, I found that that was actually sort of unique and strange, but I feel very blessed to have had that, and that certainly provided me with a lot of strength, I think, for anything that I wanted to do, knowing that I had such a strong support network between my brother, my sister, and my parents. But when I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor, but I thought a medical doctor. Ended up being a doctor of German cultural history, so it was a little off, but did
A
get
little
the
different.
doctorate. And it's I feel as if life in general has many chapters. And so as long as one, lives fully in each chapter, one can change on a dime.
Mhm.
So I've changed on a dime many times.
That's good. And I think having that flexibility is important. And I'm assuming kind of what you mentioned, I'm pretty close with my family as well. And I think it's really important, but I assume that having that kind of, ability to do so has really been helpful throughout like your time growing up, is just being able to stay fluid in your process. And even though you wanted to be kind of a medical doctor and you switched to something, slightly different, like I don't think that from your end was ever, like an issue, because you did what you're passionate about. And I'm sure your family was probably also completely behind it. Is
Oh
that kind
yeah.
of the case?
Oh, absolutely. They were very supportive. They want me to do whatever I want to do. So that was very freeing. I think there are a lot of kids that grow up that feel as if they're being sort of pigeonholed into doing something in particular, or something that they think their parents want them to do, or things
Mhm.
that they think they should do. But I was lucky. I was able to really pursue what I was passionate about and also what I was good at. So that was sort of what led me.
Great. And then so we've gone through a little bit of the childhood. And so what was college like for you? What was that process?
College was a lot of fun. I went to Earlham College for undergraduate, and then I went to University of London for my master's and PhD, and then I went to Oxford
Well,
University for postdoc. So a lot of very different experiences, but I feel that having seen what university life is like both in the U.S. and abroad, I think that American students have a lot of flexibility in ways that European students do not. Whereas we're able to sort of explore, and, liberal arts education, figure out what we like best, what we're good at. And that was really wonderful for me, because as I said, I started out thinking I wanted to be a medical doctor and doing pre-med classes. And I was like, Actually, no, I think I'd rather do literature." So
yeah.
I shifted that, and that really led me through all of my education, was pursuing literature and cultural history. It was something I loved. But it was, you with regard to university or college, there was a lot of trying to expand my horizons and use the time to learn new things and do things that I would not normally gravitate towards, just because I felt that they were important to have done at least once. So I played a varsity sport, which I'd never really been interested. I was more the Jane Austen tea kind of person. But then I played varsity field hockey for 3 years in college, or actually I think I played it all 4 years. But yeah, and then I wanted a different kind of experience for my graduate school. So instead of staying in the US, I decided to go to England,
That's
which was an
great.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah, and
very
I was about to
different
ask you.
system.
It is, yeah, absolutely. I've done some, not the same, but studying abroad, and it is very different. And I think, would you say, I mean, the traveling component was part of it, or more so the education, or
Both.
both?
I thought it'd be really interesting to, study in a different system, in a different country. And so just having that experience in itself, I thought was very exciting for me. And, the travel component certainly didn't, hurt. I mean, it
Hmm.
was great, but I spent most of my time in libraries. So I was very nerdy when it came to how I approached, my graduate school. Looking back, I was like, God, I should have gone out more.
I
But
know. I think most of us think that it's one or the other, right? No one's like, I've gone out the right amount. It's either I've gone out too much or too little.
yeah.
Um, and so after college, what were the next steps from your end? I mean, you've been in the UK for a while. You know, you've studied in the US. Did you want to stay abroad, or were you planning on coming back to the United States?
No, I mean, I was open, but I was abroad for about 10 years. I mean, I wanted to come back to the US, and I took a position as a professor, and I taught in the US for a while, and then I went and taught at Humboldt University in Berlin for a number of years, which was a lot of fun and a really great opportunity. I got to chair a department, and and that experience, I think, I felt almost that I had reached everything I wanted to do when it came to academia. I was able to teach, I was the Walter Benjamin Chair of German Jewish Cultural History at Humboldt University in Berlin. And, I got to teach everything with original sources. I got to teach in German. It
Well,
was a really wonderful experience. And for my field, it wasn't going to ever get better than that. So I felt really free in the sense that I loved academia and I loved teaching, but I was open to doing something different when the idea came about. And that's sort of when my husband and I decided that we wanted to move to the city that we loved and work together and change our careers. And I think we were both at a point where we were at peace with changing our careers.
sure. Yeah, and that's a great transition. We've jumped right in. Sonat, your transitions are really good here. And and so academia, alcohol. Sometimes they go hand in hand.
Often.
Which, uh, how did you? How did you? What's the story? Be? I mean, let's go like just the beginning, right? The idea stage. Like, how did? I mean, was it called KOVAL? Like, how did that start as an idea even?
Well, we were trying to think about what we would do for a family business in the Chicagoland area, and we were sitting around with my family, and my father used to get tons and tons of Publishers Clearinghouse, magazines
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And so one of them was Time Magazine, and there was an article in it about some gentleman in upstate New York that had started a whiskey company called Tuttletown. And they said, the article sort of talked about how there might be, a craft distilling, wave similar to what there was with beer, but it hadn't really started yet. It was sort of
Mm-hmm.
just getting going. And they were talking about sort of how this might be the next thing or a new trend. And we were reading it and talking about it. And my sister's like, well, you could do that. I mean, my husband, we talked sort of about different things that we might be able to do. And, distilling had sort of come up, but because my husband grew up distilling and he comes from
Oh,
three
okay.
generations of distillers in Austria. His grandfather has an award-winning cider company, and they also make brandies and also liqueurs. And so, he'd been doing this as chores his whole life, and he went and got a PhD in politics and economics.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think he'd be doing distilling, but after we started talking about it, it seemed like it would be a really exciting thing to do for a number of reasons, not least because there hadn't been a distillery in Chicago since the mid 1800s.
Wow.
So there was sort of a challenge there, and also sort of, it seemed like it needed to happen. And in addition to that, it afforded us the ability to work together and to, build something of high quality, manufacture something. It felt very American, to
Yeah.
do this, at a time in which there seemed to be less and less manufacturing going on. It seemed, part of a revival to do more manufacturing and make something from scratch using ingredients found in the Midwest. And so it was exciting on a lot of levels. It seemed romantic and fun, and also
Mhm.
allowed us to use a lot of the knowledge that he had gained growing up. And there wasn't a lot of knowledge, let's just say, in the United States at the time when it came to the craft distilling movement, which provided us with another opportunity because we had the knowledge and we had a lot of experience behind us, but not just, knowledge and experience of the distilling process, but also the equipment.
Mhm.
We were able simultaneously to, in addition to building a liquor company manufacturing alcohol, we were also able to start a consulting company and teaching others how to do it. And also we started representing a number of the
Wow.
manufacturers in Europe who make equipment for distilling, such as this
Interesting.
beautiful
I
still
was gonna say, if you
I
move slightly
make.
to the left a little bit, we'll be able to see those lovely. Wow. I mean, those are intense machines, and
Yeah,
I'll ask you about those later.
for sure.
Yeah.
So we saw it as like there was a lot of opportunity, and it was exciting, and there were also a lot of challenges, many, but it seemed like something that we were willing to give a go to. And
Hmm.
so instead of buying a home, we'd save some money as for a down payment, but instead of buying that home, we ended up investing in a still and moved in with
Wow.
my family, my parents, and into my brother's old bedroom with our brand new baby, and started Koval and invested everything into the company, and then also everything from our other company, our consulting company, into growing the brand
That's
and the
amazing.
company. And we went from just being us to now being probably one of the
Oh, we'll
largest
we'll ask those questions
independent.
soon. Don't worry, we'll
Okay,
get
I
there.
won't go there. I won't go
I
there.
have I have more questions. We're gonna go through the whole growth of the business. I have so many questions. Trust me, that we're gonna get there.
Sure.
I like the progression of and learning some of the challenges too that you faced. I think that's really interesting because one of the items that is really important to understand here is that it's like you said, it's very romantic to come up with this idea and you're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do this. We have some knowledge on it, but there's 10,000 steps and like doors and other things you have to get through to get to where you guys are now, which we're gonna get to. Um, and I want to hear that first. Like, what were? I mean, obviously, you had to move in back when you were with your parents, and probably a space that was what, a couple hundred square feet because it's now a baby and you and your husband.
Right.
I mean, what were the challenges you faced early on to try to even come up with this concept to build, to build this brand?
Well, I would say one of the largest challenges was the fact that the laws had not been changed in Illinois since 1934 when it came to alcohol production, which meant that they needed to be changed because they were not providing a very robust business environment for craft distillery. So they needed to be changed to make it possible to do a few things that were truly necessary, in my opinion, such as retailing on site, doing tours, tastings. None of that was legal. You could make alcohol, but you couldn't have any contact with a consumer or a
Hmm.
fan or somebody interested. And well, how do you make this? Could I have a taste? No, you can't because it wasn't legal when we started. So I also had to figure out how to change the laws, which was in itself a really interesting process. As they say, and I'm sure this is particularly true for Illinois, that there are two things you don't ever want to see made, how they're made. It's sausage and legislation. And so it was a fun process, figuring out, how to do it. And, you realize there are a lot of players in the industry that have different agendas. And so that was a real education in itself, and provided me with a lot of understanding of sort of the industry in general from more of a legal perspective. So that had to happen, and luckily it did happen. So I got the laws changed. We created the first
How long did that
craft.
take you?
Took me about 9 months, maybe a little bit less than a year, which I think is actually very fast.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
for
I was
Illinois.
really lucky to have an amazing senator and House rep behind me. So Heather Steens and Greg Harris, both amazing. And they really helped, shepherd it along. So we were lucky. Also, I had the support of my alderman, Gene Schulter at the time, who is really incredible in making it possible, really in the beginning, to even have this business in Chicago. So,
That's great.
having strong political advocates is always important in the liquor industry.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, it makes sense because obviously there's quite a bit of money in liquor, and you can hire quite a few people for your local community. And you bring back a good point from earlier, which is, back I believe in the 20s and 30s, they said, I believe it was like 1/3 of all things were made in Chicago. It's like 1/3 of all things in the United States were made in Chicago, or even beyond the United States.
Mhm.
And at this point, like, very little is made in the US as a whole, and Chicago obviously included. And so you bring it back to just like,
Yeah.
we have to make a change and actually do something to, bring back manufacturing, and distilling is a manufacturing of liquor, right? It's a similar concept. And now we've gotten a few other brands that probably have utilized what you've taken. Like, I mean, there's quite a few manufacturing companies coming back to Chicago and the South Side and West Side, et cetera. So it's interesting. I'm wondering if they've learned from what you've done and kind of reutilized it for what they're doing now. Because there are
Are
a
you,
lot
are
of
you
liquor
talking
companies,
about other liquor companies?
not just liquor, but I think in general, just bringing back manufacturing, which it
Yeah.
took a long time for us to do. And I think people are finally starting to do that.
Well, I feel like the craft movement in general, whether it's like alcoholic beverages or coffee or
Hmm.
chocolate, candy, I mean, all of these things, that are produced sort of on a more craft scale, artisan type scale. I think yeah, has been a very big revival, whether it's like, kombucha or this or that. And people are manufacturing things, of that kind, certainly more
Yeah.
in the US than they were before. So that's very exciting. I
Yeah.
think that we did see, however, during the pandemic, that there needs to be a lot more produced in locally. The fact that so many distilleries that focus on making whiskey or gin or other beverages for consumption needed to really shift their entire productions, such as Koval did, to making hand sanitizer because it wasn't available anywhere else, shows that our supply chains can very easily be strained, and
Hmm.
that's dangerous. It's
Sonat, you keep on pushing forward ahead. I was gonna get there, man. She's always one step ahead of me, just like during the movement right here. I was gonna get there, but you beat me to it. We're gonna get there too. Don't worry. So so we are at this point. You've changed the laws, which, okay, no big deal, right? Just let's go change some Illinois laws. Right, it's easy peasy. So you've changed the laws. Now you've probably saved up a little bit by living at home. What's the next step?
Well, I mean, we've continue, and we actually still do invest everything back into the company. We still don't own a home. So we're still investing everything back in. But what we did is, anytime we were able to, get bigger equipment, better equipment that had more automation possibilities, we would continue to upgrade everything. And we grew from, just being me and my husband and one child in the pack and play, to me and my husband and two children, no longer in pack and plays, and, almost, 40 team members.
Wow.
So, and now 55 export markets, in addition to national distribution in the US, and pretty much national distribution across all of Canada as well. So it's been very exciting. There's been a lot of
Hmm.
growth and development over time, and we're just constantly focusing on improving, and in doing that, that helps us grow.
Yeah, and and obviously being a consumer, I've seen quite a few different types of products on the shelf here. Would you want to talk through, like, what was the first thing that you started? I believe you mentioned whiskey was the first, or am I wrong? Was it gin?
It was actually brandy. And
Brandy.
it's
Okay.
sort of a funny story. So we originally were thinking of doing brandy because that's one of the products that, Robert grew up making his whole childhood, helping his grandfather make uh, brandy. But, as with licenses, you never quite know when it's going to arrive. And this is before everything was like even super digital. I mean,
Hmm.
there wasn't Google Maps, when we started. I remember we would
Yeah.
drive places and you'd have to print it out, the directions. So in the same vein, there was not a lot of you couldn't just get your license emailed to you, and so we had no clue when we were going to get it in the mail, and you weren't allowed to start distilling until you received your license. And so we were waiting for all of it. And when we, finally received it, it was a little bit later than we had thought. So we thought that we'd be able to start distilling in August. It ended up being October. And with that, the weather was getting a little bit colder. And we wanted to start with brandies just as sort of an homage to Robert's grandfather, from whom he learned to distill. And also, we thought it'd be fun to make a pear brandy. And it was very difficult to source pears also, that late, locally. A lot of them had sold already to brokers who were selling to the retail stores. And so I had to then order them from, further afield, so to speak. So they were coming from Washington State. And the trick about that is we were hoping that they would not freeze in
Mm.
transit. Because when fruit freezes in transit and you are going to mash it, you have to mash it all immediately. And that means if you have, 7 tons of pears coming to you,
Wow.
that means you have to mash 7 tons of pears like immediately, like nonstop working, don't stop until you're done kind of thing. So we were hoping that they wouldn't freeze. Of course they did freeze. We went through mashing all of those pears, and it was like really 24 hours a day for like 2 days. It was an intense experience. And of course you can't just mash them up and,
Hmm.
start the fermentation process. You have to, at least the way we do it, obviously everything that might have been a bruise that happened in transport had to be cut off because it could create a problem in the mash. We
Wow.
took off all the stems because we did not want the stems affecting the flavor. So it was a lot of work. And after that, we didn't want to risk getting fruit, from far away. So we said, you know what, let's just focus on grain. And actually, it
Hmm.
was a real blessing because, brandy's not super popular in America. I love it. It's a wonderful spirit. In fact, we have a pear brandy coming out soon.
Ooh,
Yeah, you heard it
nice.
here. But we do them now just almost for fun. It's not something that we decided we wanted to focus on. So really that first kind of, not mistake, but that first scramble or pivot became incredibly important for the direction of the company going forward, because then we focused on grains and whiskey. So it was interesting how it worked out.
Yeah, but it worked out. It seems like it worked out well because whiskey had a resurgence too. I mean, whiskey's always been popular, but with kind of the growth of the old fashioned and the whiskey bars and speakeasies, which really that was what, maybe 10 years, give or take, maybe plus or minus 4 or 5 years. Um, there was I think a huge growth in the craft whiskey space where you could have only gotten a certain set of brands at most grocery stores or most liquor stores. And now, I mean, if you go to the whiskey section of a
Yeah.
grocery store, it's like three different sections, and it's massive. And so that's awesome. I mean, and you know what? Those mistakes are sometimes the best ones that can happen to you.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, and I think it's
Absolutely.
really
I mean,
unique.
in a way, there's no mistakes. It's really just part of your journey, and
Oh
how are
yeah,
you going to react to it, and what are you going to learn from it? And we learned a lot, and it pushed us
I'm
in
sure.
the right direction.
That's great. So you had the whiskey, and how long were you like how long did you stay with this, or did you continue putting out different SKUs, different types of whiskeys? Was like How
Well,
did that work?
yeah, in the beginning, we also had a learning experience. We took a very academic approach, which isn't a very marketable one. And the academic approach was that we thought it would be really interesting to show people the differences in whiskey when it's sort of, almost new make or aged very little, so that you could really just taste like white whiskey, so that you could taste what it tastes like, not, you know, in the sense that the barrel really didn't have a lot of time to change the nature of it. So that way, um, what it tasted like when aged in a toasted barrel, and then what it tasted like in a charred barrel, sort of a medium, sort of close to alligator char barrel, because they all are very different. And then we decided that we would do that with a rye, an oat, a wheat, a spelt, and a millet. And then that we would also have a bourbon, and then we had a 4 grain. And at some point we had like, I don't know, we had too many whiskeys. We had more whiskeys than Levi's had jeans, or almost
Sure.
as many as Starbucks had versions of coffee. So it was a problem, because what ended up happening was it was a really interesting exercise, and where you could go and you could taste a white rye, and then a rye aged in a toasted barrel, and then a rye aged in a charred barrel, and see all the differences. But when it came to, having this in some sort of marketable way, what it would end up happening is, as they would enter out into the world, one store might love a toasted millet, and another one would say, oh, I really like the white millet, and another one would say, oh, I like the charred millet. And then, other ones would only carry the rye, or other ones would only carry the oat. And so
Yeah.
for a consumer, somebody looking for their product that they like, it was near impossible to find it, because there was so much diversification. There were too many products, and everyone was choosing just the one that they wanted on their shelves, as opposed to having sort of a sales strategy. So we didn't come at it at first with a very appropriate sales strategy. We just came at it with a wouldn't this be cool to have available kind of strategy, which we soon learned just doesn't work. So that's something that's great for the distillery itself. When people come to the distillery, there's so many options, and people are able to try many different things on site. But when it comes to, pushing things out into the market, it's important to focus, which we learned, luckily, relatively early on.
Good. Yeah, and it seems like, obviously there's the concept of, well, one, segmenting kind of your options to a point where there's too many, and then also providing people with too many options is also not always a great thing. And that's something we continue to learn. And, with VisualFizz, we always say like less is more, when it comes to pricing strategy or options, or, anything that you provide to people. It's like, give them 3, don't give them 10, give
Right.
them 3. And I'm a big advocate of this for just restaurants. You go to like Cheesecake Factory or something, and you're like, I can't eat any of this. It's like 600 pages. Or you go to, like a establishment that has 3 appetizers, 4 entrees, 2 desserts, and like a drink menu, and you're like, okay, this is easy. For at least most people. If you can't eat those, then I'm sorry. But generally,
Right.
like I prefer, give me less, because I'll be looking at the menu for 45 minutes.
Right. Exactly.
No, that's good, and it's good you learned that quickly. And I think you bring up a good point, because people, when they go to your distillery, they want the experience, they want to try
Right.
different things, and they're generally either there for 2 reasons: they're advocates for your brand, or they are there for a learning experience. And I think that's the
Right.
nice thing, is that like, without, you can differentiate what you're offering by doing that, and create that like
Right.
secondary experience outside of what they already know, which is probably more of your standardized lines that go out to
Exactly.
groceries or liquor stores.
For sure. For sure. So, I mean, it works out, but it was, in the beginning, we just were acting a little too academic about it, and
Well, you wanted to
not
give people
sales.
like an experience, but that makes sense, because I'm assuming you also learned about how how retail works at that point, right?
Oh, we were learning a lot.
Which is
Yes.
not an easy place at all. I mean, it's like cutthroat and crazy. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the retail space for you guys.
Well, when yeah, when we started, we were learning a lot about retail, but also just in general about the liquor industry. And it's an industry that's really tricky because it's as a small independent brand, it can be very hard to compete because the ways in which this business functioned, I would say, before craft got involved, before, smaller producers that did not have money, let's say, for a lot of marketing, or at least traditional marketing.
Mhm.
It was done with a lot of money, and so, what does that mean? I mean, we would find out that, just to get into certain places cost money, and this was funny because when we started, we were right next to a brewery, Metropolitan Brewing Company. They're also in Chicago, and we were both discovering these things, at the same time, where we would compare notes, and there was, a lot of places would have um, the idea that they could get stuff for free or
Mhm.
request it, or think that and it's not actually legal, but there was this sort of pressure by a lot of different places. I would say it's gotten a little bit better over time, but and we were learning this. We were trying to do everything we could to be running a regular business and following all of the regulations and laws, and then we would do something and hear something, and it was just really shocking. I remember going into a bar to introduce my brand, and the bar owner said, "Oh, I would really love to carry your stuff, but I can't because this other brand just bought my patio, and I don't
Wow.
want to lose, the trip they're going to give me to some
Mm,
amazing place."
wow.
And I would hear this a lot, and all of a sudden I was like, what is going on here? Because I read all the laws. I became very informed on what one could do and what one could not do, but then I kept running up against all sorts of stuff going on that really just did not seem appropriate. But at the end of the day, if you stick to just doing things the way you want to do them, that is appropriate, and just avoid all of the noise that is going on, that might be the way other people have done things in the past. We found the path that worked for us, which was really finding those that really truly wanted to work with us, and it wasn't just about trying to get something
Free
special.
vacation. Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm sure
absolutely.
that that's true for many different industries. I mean, it's something that I know probably happens a lot in different businesses. But I think that at the end of the day, one can have integrity and do things. And if you do things at really high quality, and you spend all of your time, and at the, early days when people would be like, sure, we'll carry you, but we need this much for free or something like that. I mean, I was working like crazy. I was like nursing a baby. I was trying to mash and distill and, figure out deals with distributors. And I was like, you know what? No, nobody's getting anything for free. I'm
Mm,
sorry, but that's
good.
that's really not the way to go about it. And I think that the industry has grown as more craft brands have entered into it, and so many of them are independent, small brands that really, every dollar counts.
Hmm.
That it's also changed the nature of the industry, and there's more of a demand for craft, whereas before, when you were one of the first craft brands, um, it was hard, getting
Sure.
heard, but now it's a whole other world.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of individuals don't value the time and effort. And we have that as well in our business where, you know, you have multiple calls, you get a proposal, we talk to a proposal, we're waiting for a month, there's no response. And and my co-founder probably who's on this call here knows that I'm a loudmouth about it because I don't agree with how people act. And I'm a fair loser. If we lose because another brand is better, bigger, faster, cheaper, whatever, sure. But from my end, the big thing is, acknowledge our existence and that, we put the time into it. And I'd say, this is our rate. This is how much time we put into it. You've cost our business X thousands of dollars because we can't focus on other clients. And so I'm completely there with you. It might be a bad move from a PR standpoint to talk, against that at the end of the day, but it's our integrity, it's our time. And, it's basically stealing from small businesses when you just want in our world, like a proposal for no accountability.
Right.
And in your world, if you want free product and you really don't intend to use it, or, down the road, maybe you will one day. So I'm completely in agreement on that end. We did get a chat request, and I'm going to actually ask, there's going to be just an FYI for everyone. We're going to do Q&As very soon. So feel free to throw some in right now, and we'll probably do some Q&As very soon. We have a few more minutes to just chat here. And the one thing I want to chat through, because I know KOVAL has been such a kind of integral part of the growth of kind of distilleries in Chicago and elsewhere. So you've mentioned, obviously, with COVID-19, you guys made a really great shift. I want to briefly talk about that because I'm over talking about COVID, but I think you guys did something really great. I don't know if it was to survive or to help, and I think that will be really interesting. So that's my first question. And then my part B of that question is, what does the future of KOVAL look like? What does it look like now that we're at the, knock on wood somewhere, right, that we're at the hump of this thing and we're looking forward and people are ready to spend a lot of money again and buy things and go out. So if you can just answer me those couple of items, I'd be really excited to hear.
Yeah, sure. When it came to our decision to pivot and make hand sanitizer, it was, we would have survived the pandemic, one way or another. But the issue was, how are you going to survive the pandemic? And for us, shifting allowed us to keep a lot more of our team in place throughout the entire pandemic. Whereas had we not done that, I think that it would have been a lot more difficult to, keep people on staff. But the reason why we did it was because we really wanted to help and we saw it coming. Because we have an international presence, we were very aware of what was going on in Europe, which is one of our most important, trading partners outside of the United States. And we were seeing that some distilleries in Europe had started shifting to making hand sanitizer for their populations because it became necessary. And so we had already had the plan to do this and had been lobbying the government, as well as, speaking with local officials about the possibility. I would say that when we started doing this, it was actually illegal to make that pivot. You cannot make anything aside from alcohol for consumption if that is what your license is for. So essentially making alcohol for hand sanitizer was not a legal option at the time. So we had to wait to get federal approval. But because we were putting everything in place in advance, the minute we got the federal approval, which came in on a Thursday night at 6:00, I got the email. That Monday morning, we were making our first deliveries of free hand sanitizer to members of the local community, the medical community, those who are first responders. But the idea was that we would just do that a little bit, like for a few batches, and then we would go back to making, sort of some, alcohol for consumption. but we ended up only making hand sanitizer for about 5 months.
Wow.
And we donated over 5,000 gallons to the local community. We donated to pretty much all the hospitals in the Chicagoland area, even some in Wisconsin, some in Indiana. We worked with, and we could not have done this without the help from so many people all over the city of Chicago. I mean, we were working in concert with a huge network of individuals who helped us with these donations, who either helped us monetarily buy more supplies for this, such as, Adelson PC, it's a law firm, Beyond Chicago, it's a nonprofit organization. We worked with Heartland Alliance, we worked with so many different organizations to help get the product out to those who needed it. We also worked with a huge group of logistics organizations that helped us, whether it was, MedSpeed, which is a medical logistics company that delivered all the hand sanitizer for free to the hospitals and first responders, ambulance companies, nursing homes. But even the Chicago Board of Tourism, Choose Chicago, sent drivers and cars to pick it up and drop it off where needed. So really, like, the city turned around to just start helping each other. We were overwhelmed with so much support from the other brewing community, like in Chicago. So the brewers all came together, whether it was small breweries such as Metropolitan or Dovetail, or, all the breweries on Malt Row where KOVAL is located in Chicago, came together and donated their beer for us to distill and turn into hand sanitizer. But also, all the way up to Evanston with Temperance, and also breweries all the way to the south side of Chicago were donating their beer. Even distributors of beer came and brought tankers of beer for us to distill. Goose Island, even Bud Light we distilled. So it was really incredible and heartwarming. And I would say that everybody at KOVAL was giving, 250% every day. I would have team meetings at 2:30 in the morning, often, just to make sure we were getting things out and done. We had to really change everything we did into a different kind of organization. So we sold some to a business. We did business to business sales, but then anybody that was on the front lines, nursing homes, hospitals, we donated it. Those with food insecurity and organizations that help those with food insecurities, we gave it to them. It was intense. It was really
It's amazing.
An incredible experience. And so once we were in it, we were like in it, and there was no way to do anything else because the need was just so outstandingly present in our minds. I mean, we would get calls from, the heads of nursing homes crying because they had ordered, lots of hand sanitizer, and their order had been apparently diverted, and weren't going to get it. And so, it was really amazing to be able to be a part of it and to really help out when the city needed it. So it was an incredible experience. It was just an incredible experience.
Sure. That restores my faith in humanity just a little bit. It's nice to see so many companies coming in and assisting, and then obviously you guys being kind of the forefront of it. So no, that's great. I mean, that is amazing, and I'm sure you're happy that you don't have to do that anymore. Go back to your passion, right?
Yes.
But it's great that you got into that early and were able to kind of pivot and help so many people. I mean, it's really cool. Too bad VisualFizz we couldn't help in some capacity. I didn't even know. I mean, I knew you guys did the hand sanitizer, but we only have so many people that can drive around, right? No, but that sounds really cool. Next time, if you need anything, let us know.
Okay. I will, believe me, yeah.
Yeah, no, we're happy to do it. And then I know we're a little over here in terms of the Q&As, but I did want to ask really quickly my last question, then push it over to some of the questions. What's the future for you guys? What does it look like for you guys and then for yourself personally?
Yeah, well, finally, we're able to get to what we were hoping to do just as the pandemic got started, which is open our visitor center, our new store, which is at our main production facility, tours at the main production facility, also a bar with a patio, which we'd wanted to open for a long time, but then, as the pandemic hit, it was impossible. And, we had started construction on it, and, that all stopped really
Yeah.
during the pandemic. So we were really happy to be able to get back to that. And so I would say for Koval, for the immediate future, it's getting all of that open. In fact, this weekend, we are going to be opening our store for the first time for actual
Nice.
people to walk in. I mean, we were doing curbside really just until this weekend. It was completely contactless, whereas now, no serious contact, but people will be able to come into the store with, a mask on, and be able to sort of see a little bit more of the experience and the visitor experience, and be able to take tours and sign up for tours and also events and classes in person, which is great. And then the bar, we hope to open at some point, maybe midsummer, at least outside. I don't know if we're going to open the indoor portion of the bar yet. Probably just for private events, or, at least, we're going to ease in slowly.
Sure.
So that's the immediate thing for Koval. And, I'm going all along with all of this. I mean, that's what I do. So I don't really see anything different on the horizon for me right now than, making sure that we're increasing distribution and increasing the spread of distribution, and all of that. And obviously making sure that my boys are doing their homework, and,
that's another full-time job.
Yeah.
For sure. So you seem like you have plenty of free time right now. You could probably take on another project, right? No, that sounds amazing. Let us know when the patio opens. We'll reserve a table for VisualFizz, and
I love it.
definitely are up for that. We have a lot of clients that we have to meet up with at this point. We haven't seen anyone in like a year and a half. So
There you
save a
go.
table for us. I'm
Cranberry
gonna hop.
is all around. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll do the whole tasting. If you do the sampler that you mentioned earlier that didn't work so well in retail, I'm all for it. That sounds really cool.
We do. We're going to be doing lots of samplers.
Good. Yeah, good. I'll make sure to get a designated driver for that then.
Perfect.
Awesome. I'm gonna hop into a couple questions here. We're kind of gonna go rapid fire a little bit, so let's keep the answers maybe like a minute long, so I can get a few in. I'd say, okay, here's one. What's been your favorite part of running Koval?
Working with family. Not only do I get to work with my husband, who has a very different skill set, which I admire, and we work very well together. We trust each other's, ability to deal with different sides of the company, and listen to each other's advice. And it's been a really wonderful, rewarding experience. But I also work with my sister, who is our designer, designs all of our labels. She has her own design firm called Dando Projects in New York. And so I get to.
Nice.
Sister. My mom has also been involved in doing things. She did our liqueur labels, and she's an artist. And so that's been really a lot of fun. And while my father was still alive, he would come to the distillery and put boxes together and talk about being a boxer. So I mean, it's been great.
Nice.
And in that sense, I would say, being able to work with family has been my favorite part, and have my family close at hand. As I said before, being at Koval, I've been able to be a mom while working. So I can have my kids with me. When they were really little, I could nurse on demand, and, that's not usual.
No, it's great. I think that goes back to what you said right in the beginning about being so close knit with your family. That was one of my goals too, is like, obviously, start a business young. My first business I launched was in age 20. And so really start that young, so that in the future I can really focus on, free time and travel and family. So I am a big advocate of that as well. Let's see. I think. Okay, this one's good. What's some advice that you would give others starting out their own brand? And let's speak. Well, let's do part A, part B, right? First one is just their own brand, their own business, and
Okay.
part B is like something within a similar space, so like a liquor space, or maybe some more just a
A
little bit more
beverage.
difficult to, yeah, beverage space or food and bev, or just like a slightly more difficult space to be in because of the
Right.
competition.
Absolutely. Well, if it's something along the lines of liquor, which is a regulated, controlled substance, so to speak, and I would imagine there are a lot of entrepreneurs interested in CBD and that space. I would say one thing that's really important for these kinds of businesses is reading the laws, understanding what you are allowed to do and what you are not allowed to do, which is incredibly important. And you can keep from making very costly mistakes by just doing that simple thing. It's just doing your homework and understanding the business framework. I can give you an example in the brewing world. There was somebody that started a brewery, probably did not read the laws very carefully, and they were allowed to brew and sell, but they weren't allowed to have a tap room. And their whole business model was based on being able to also
Mm,
have a tap room. And so they ended up having to close because, that was a big disconnect. And so just making sure that the business framework and the laws are going to work for you and going to work for you where you want to do it, because the different laws, particularly in a regulated business, can also be different state to state. So what's allowed in Illinois might not be allowed in Indiana, but it might be allowed and might be even more free in Missouri. You won't know until you read up on it and take that into consideration. So I would say do your homework is always the single most important thing. I believe that it's best to do it yourself as opposed to outsource it. There are plenty of lawyers that would be very happy to learn about these things for $500 an hour, but a lot of these things are important for you to know. And there's a place for lawyers, but I think that when it comes to the initial research, that's something you have to do yourself
mhm.
and own it and know it, and then you will be in a good place to start it.
I agree. I totally agree. And I assume the do your homework aspect was both the mom and the professor in you, right?
Yes, that's right.
um,
Yes.
one last question. I think it's important, and we didn't. I think when we first chatted, I learned this, but I forgot. The name. Where did it come from? What's the
Ah.
backstory?
I don't know if that's a short answer. Um, well, it also has to do with family. We were visiting my great uncle Sigmund in Brooklyn, who was in his late 90s when we were about to start the business, and so we knew that we probably wouldn't be seeing him again if we like moved. We had a brand new baby, moved to another state, started a business, getting back to Brooklyn to see him. We didn't know when that would happen. And so we spent a whole day with him, and we were talking about starting our business, and he was telling us stories. And one of them was about how the fact that we were doing this reminded him of my great grandfather, whose name was Emmanuel, but he had the nickname Monic. But then apparently he also got the nickname Koval, which is something that I learned from Sigmund, my great uncle, during that visit. And we said, well, why did he get the nickname Koval? And he said, well, Koval in many Eastern European languages means Schmied, which is the German for it, which is also then translated into smith or blacksmith. And it means somebody, who's like a blacksmith. And you have that Kovalnik, Kovalchik. It's a very, very common Eastern European last name. That being said, in Yiddish, it has a little extra meaning, and it means somebody who, like a blacksmith, forges something new or forges ahead. And we're like, oh, I like that. That could be good. And we thought that was a really appropriate name for our company because we were trying to do something new and forge ahead, and Emmanuel was given that as a nickname in part because he left Vienna, when he was very young, to move to Chicago to start a battery company. And people thought that he was a little crazy because they were like, why would you leave Vienna? It's the center of the universe. But he's like, Europe's over. It's all about America. I'm so excited to, come to Chicago to do this. And he did it. And But you know, so they gave him this nickname. But what was also neat about it was Robert learned how to distill from his grandfather, whose last name is Schmid, which is
Wow.
basically Koval in German. So it allowed us to sort of honor both sides of the family, both, you know, these grandparents, and in addition to that, you know, there's a follow-up story to it, which was that when we entered into this factory, the one
Mhm.
here, which was really large, and we weren't sure if we could handle the move, that it was expensive and bigger than we thought we could handle at the time. And there, you know, we were walking through trying to decide if we could make this big leap. And there was only one thing in the building, and it was actually a battery charger from, you know, Monix or Emmanuel's company that he
Wow.
left Vienna to start in Chicago. And that company hadn't existed since the 1970s, late 70s. And it sort of seemed like a sign. It was sort of beshared. And so we said, okay, we're going to be here. And actually, you know, and I asked our landlord at the time, I was like, well, if we rent the space, can I buy this battery charger? And he's like, oh, you could have it. You know, the last tenants just left it here and we didn't clear it out yet. So I was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And it actually worked. And we charged our forklifts with it.
Wow.
So
That's one
fascinating.
heck of a story. Oh my gosh. Very cool. No, I love it. I This was so great. I really appreciate the time here, and I'm so excited because I think we have to like do something else, like a blog article or something beyond that. I think the story is just very cool, and I really appreciate your time here, Sonnet. Just all of it was
My
very, very
pleasure.
interesting. I think I've listened to the story twice, and I got so much more out of it, you know, the second time too, which is great.
Yeah.
So as next steps, I will the VisualFizz team let us know when the outdoor patio is open and ready for
Oh, for
us.
sure.
We will be there, you know, with cups in hand, ready for you. Beyond that, you know, really appreciate this opportunity. For anybody else listening, either live or via YouTube or other channels, feel free to reach out to us. And if you have any questions, you know, we could reach out to Sonnet as well, or, you know, we'll figure out a way, you know, to make that happen. But obviously, we really appreciate all the other entrepreneurs that come onto the VisualFizz Growth Series. It's always such a pleasure, and have a lovely rest of your day and week. And I'll be in touch with my team here for next steps and everything. So really
Love it.
excited. Thank you so
Can't wait
much.
to see you at the distillery, and
Oh,
such a
we'll be
pleasure.
there.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one. Have a good
You
evening.
too. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thanks.
Sure.